In this tutorial, we're looking at the try, catch, and finally statements. The reason it says end of document here is because at the bottom we're outputting this end of document. The reason I put this here is because I want to show you the difference that happens when a fatal error is output or when we throw our own error. And that will become clear a little bit later on. So we're starting off by creating three variables. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this function and we're going to pass in a variable that doesn't exist. Let's see what happens. And you can see we got a fatal error, and after this it didn't continue with the rest of the script. If we right click in Chrome and we click on our error here, we'll see that it says uncaught reference error, D is not defined. Okay, so let's comment this out for now, and let's take a look at our try-catch statement. So try-catch statements work like this. We're going to try to do this. If there's an exception here, or if we throw our own error, that's going to get passed into this catch here. This catch is like a function, and this is the parameter that's getting passed in. What's getting passed in here is the exception that's coming from the try. And then we can do whatever with it here. Okay, so let's check that out. So you can see what we did here is we have the function here. We called the function and we passed in D. This is the same D that gave us the fatal error before, and we're passing that in and we're outputting it. But this isn't working because it doesn't exist. Therefore, the exception is getting passed to the catch here, and then we're outputting the error, and that's why we're getting this reference error, D is not defined. And notice when we did this, it still continued with the rest of our script, and we were able to output end of document. So that's a pretty big difference there. The next thing we're going to do is we're just going to output 10 divided by 0. Of course, you cannot divide by 0, but let's see what happens here. And it outputs infinity. And I'm not sure if this is really mathematically correct, but obviously, I guess it is correct, but what we're going to do is we're going to create our own error. So let's just delete this here. And let's take a look at our next try-catch statement. So here we have a try-catch statement. Inside the try there's a function. The function is named divide, and it takes a numerator and a denominator. If the denominator that's passed in is equal to 0, we're going to create our own error, and we're going to say throw new error cannot divide by 0. And that is going to get passed in here, and then we're going to output it. So we're first going to call this function. Let's first put something that's possible, like 10 over 3, and let's check that out. And you can see that here this evaluated to false, the denominator wasn't 0, so we came down here and we output it, and everything was fine. And we didn't need to go into this because there was no error that was passed in here. Now if we change this to 0, which is dividing by 0, and we refresh, now we're creating this error that's getting passed in here, and then we're outputting the error, cannot divide by 0. So in this one, this error was being created by the browser, and we were passing in here. But in this example, we're creating our own error, and it's also getting passed in here. Let's look at the next example. In this next example, we're creating an array of students. This S is for students, and it's a messed up array, and it has names and it has email addresses. But what we want from this array is we just want the names of the students. We don't want their email addresses. We're setting I to 0, names is set to an empty array, E is set for an empty array. Errors are going to go in here. Well, actually, error messages. And error count is set to 0. So let's check this out. So while I is less than the length of the S array, try this. So result is set to S sub I, and we're running the search method on it, and we're passing in this regular expression. Now, we haven't looked at regular expressions yet, and it doesn't matter if you don't understand this right now. But basically, what this regular expression does, what this does here is we're searching inside this element of the array, and we're looking for this @ symbol. Okay, and whatever is returned from this search method, we're storing it in result. And if this @ symbol was not found in one of these, it's going to return -1. And if this was true, result is equal to -1. That means it was one of the names because it didn't have an @ symbol. And then we're going to push that element of the array onto the names array. So this names array is starting out empty, and whenever we find an element of the array that doesn't have the @ symbol, we're going to push it onto the names array. If we did find this one, we're going to throw a new error, S sub I is not a valid name. So this is going to be email address is not a valid name. So whenever it finds the email address with the @ symbol, we're going to throw this error, and then let's continue here. So we're going to throw this error. That error is going to get passed into this catch function here. It's just like a function. It's going to get passed right in here, and then we're going to push the error onto the E array. And you can see the E array starts off empty, and all of those these errors, whatever email address is not a valid name, is going to get pushed onto this array, and we are going to increment error count each time. Now this finally down here, finally is going to happen every time. So as long as the try was executed, this finally will be executed too. So you can put whatever kind of code you want in the finally. You can put nothing in there, but what I chose to put in there was to increment I, because whenever try happens, finally is going to happen. So I just chose to increment I each time. That way, every time we're looping through the array, we're incrementing each time. We don't go into an infinite loop. So let's run this and take a look at it. Oh, and yeah, actually there was no output here. If it was successful, we're pushing things onto the array here, and we're pushing things onto the array here. So there's no output, and here's some output. So what we're going to do here is we're going to output the names array, and here we can see, remember this is an array, and here we can see there's 3 elements in the array: Tom, Jenny, Sally, and that was what we wanted. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to output this. An exception was caught, and we're going to see how many times an exception was caught. And we're going to, the way we count this is by just checking the length of the E array. And remember, the E array is holding all of those error messages. Let's refresh. An exception was caught 2 times. The last thing we're doing is we're resetting I to 0, and then we are going to loop through the E array to find out the error messages. And so here we can see the contents of the of that array. Error, this is not a valid name. Error, Jenny is not a valid name, and so on.